Your symmetry is hurting your success, yet most people go their entire life without understanding how they can fix it. So, I'm going to outline to you how I transformed my own facial symmetry and how you can do the same for the sake of your life success. Now, why do I put these two components together? Well, the reason comes down to the value that the human brain places on facial symmetry. If you think about evolution, humans had to ensure that who they were communicating with didn't carry any diseases. They didn't risk their own health. And as a consequence, the brain has become so effective in finding faces that can give even an ounce of a lack of health or carrying diseases. And this then transformed into going beyond just a lack of health indicators, but onto structural issues. And the easiest structural issue for the human brain to be able to analyze is facial symmetry. And this isn't just me saying it, because if it was just me saying it, that's one thing. But science has studied this time and time again and proven it. So, this has a direct correlation with success, because if your first impressions are being hindered, not because of your lack of expertise in a particular field, not because of your ambitiousness, but rather because of what you are presenting to the world, then that's a huge bottleneck in your life, is it not? And moreover, you would have experienced it. The whole reason, the very rationale as to why humans look at themselves and feel less well about themselves after is because your intuitive mind has an understanding of what you should look like. And when there's a mismatch there, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is exactly how you feel. And I attest to this from first-hand experience. I can tell you one story in particular, and this is where my decision to make this happen, where I'm now a signed model, where I've now retired my parents from my career and I run a hugely successful consulting agency. This happened not because I decided to do nothing, but because I actually took action with regards to my appearance, and this was the first step. I looked at myself in the mirror and I was overcome with this feeling of disgust, with this feeling of just resentment of myself. And I realized that this is never going to subside. This is only going to get worse if I don't take action. And that fuel, the fuel that I had in that moment, led me on this journey. But it wasn't a journey of hatred, because hatred will never be able to sustain itself for that long. Rather, it was a journey of understanding that for my own life, for my own being's sake, I need to make this happen. I knew that I had a huge amount of success to achieve in this life. But if I don't, I would be letting myself, not just down, but hugely under, and I couldn't afford that. In this one life that I have, I couldn't afford it. And my facial symmetry was the first thing that I noticed. I'd look in the mirror and I'd see my face and I'd think to myself, why does one part of my face stick out so much? For me, it was one of my cheekbones and it was my jaw. And I'd just think, why do my two jaw muscles sit so differently from one another? And I could not bear it. I could not bear to look at myself. Then guess what happened? When I look at myself in the mirror now, that's what happened. The entire feeling that I have about myself changed. My life trajectory changed because my asymmetry fixed. Now you're going to be thinking, okay, Levi, how did you go about fixing your asymmetry? So I'm going to get into it. Let's first understand how my story here links into what I've done and the solution. My story paves the way for the key point to understand that you need a reason to make this happen. If you don't understand how valuable your appearance is, you're never going to be able to change it. You need to have that understanding that your appearance truly is, not just from your anecdotal experiences, but scientifically proven. Your appearance is the highest leverage asset that you own. Until that key point of understanding arises, until that actually comes about, you're not going to be able to see change. Secondly, we can see from my own life story that came. Now comes down to the action, and the action begins from understanding what you're going to do. Your skull looks like this, and when your skull is asymmetrical, it simply means that one bone in particular is imbalanced. So which bone is that going to be? Well, we're going to notice that it's not actually going to be any of the bones that most people are accustomed to hearing, such as the jawbone, such as the maxillary bone, or even the cheekbones. No, it's something deeper than that. It's something that is more innate to the skull structure. It's a bone called the sphenoid bone. So, the sphenoid bone, it's often called the butterfly bone, and I'm sure you can think about why, but I'm going to show you why. It's because it really does look like it has two wings. Now, wings. If these wings in a butterfly are asymmetrical, what's going to happen? Well, the butterfly isn't going to be able to fly nearly as effectively as it could it? Because the two wings are now going to be exerting a different amount of force on each side. We don't want that, do we? So, similarly, if the two wings of the sphenoid bone, which sits deep inside of your skull, is going to be asymmetric, the consequence is that your face is asymmetrical. Now, I've laid out the logical sequence of events for you to understand that, okay, we need the two wings of the sphenoid bone to not to be asymmetrical, but to be neutrally balanced. How are we going to do that? This is going to come down to what you are doing repetitively every day. Your appearance is just a consequence of your actions. Remember, your inputs and how you leverage your inputs is going to link to your outputs. And when your inputs are fundamentally mismatched with what you envision your outputs to be, then there will never be a link. So your inputs are going to come down to how you're swallowing, how you're chewing, and your cervical alignment. So what do these three things mean? First, how you're swallowing. You swallow 2,000 times a day. And if you're swallowing even 1% wrong, what's going to happen by the end of one day? By the end of just 24 hours? Well, you're going to be 1% multiplied by 2,000 repetitions worse off. And let's say you've done that for 5 years. Now what's going to happen? Well, nothing good. We can keep it at that in simple terms. So the solution comes down to rectifying the incorrect process of swallowing, but moreover, adding force. When you swallow, you're signaling force to travel up this part, aren't you? So what is this part? In scientific jargon, which we don't need to know, but I will explain, it's called the palatopharyngeal arch. And as the name suggests, it's just an arch. However, this arch in particular allows force to travel in a uniform direction. So if I were to make you visualize an arch here, if I were to exert a force upwards uniformly, the arch is going to then allow the force to be transmitted uniformly as well, isn't it? Therefore, when the arch itself is going to sit asymmetrically because of the sphenoid bone, the butterfly bone, remember, if this bone has its two wings sitting slightly asymmetrically, now the arch is asymmetric, isn't it? Now, when you swallow, your tongue is naturally going to be inclined to push up more on this side since there's more space. It's a natural reaction to what happens. However, this singular action is what causes lifelong asymmetries, and it's what hampers the capacity for any level of success, unfortunately. And I wish I could just say that lightheartedly, but this is a proven fact as I've stated previously. So what's the fix going to be? Well, as you can imagine again, it's going to be ensuring that the tongue is providing an equal force on both sides. So how are you going to do that? Well, firstly, you need to add a force. When you're swallowing, don't just swallow subconsciously. Don't just swallow without focusing on swallowing, but rather I want you to swallow with an additional force. And you can do this right now. When you swallow, I want you to add some force up. And you're going to notice that it has a new feeling, doesn't it? But in addition to that, you also need to make sure that you are swallowing not using your cheeks and not using your lips. If you're using your cheek muscles, which are scientifically known as the buccinator muscles, has quite a long and funny name, I know, then what you're doing is you're doing what's called an infant swallow. And as the name suggests, It's called an infant swallow because you are over time going to make the cheek muscles larger and larger. If you look at my face, you can see that there is a contour here, and this contour arose as a consequence of bone remodeling. Through correcting the natural imbalances in my appearance through bone remodeling, and then reaching close enough to my genetic potential, this contour came. And the same contour is possible for all humans because it's not something that's actually difficult to achieve given you have the right knowledge and the right capacity to action changes. Now, how can you actually fix the swallow given that you're not using the cheeks? You can visualize this, you can envision it as focusing on just the back part of your tongue moving. Imagine that when food is traveling, you're chewing. Now, when food travels, you're just moving the back part of your tongue to push the food down. That's what's crucial, because if you're not doing that, then you're using too many facial muscles and making your face look larger than it needs to be and exacerbating asymmetries. People often talk about one side of their face being asymmetrical and they think that it's their facial muscles. It's not. It's going to be a bone structure issue. Yet most people are too afraid to discuss it for what it is. I've gone to university studying physics at a top 4 university in the world for craniofacial sciences. I've studied this meticulously because I know that this is what matters. Not just that. As I said, I'm a signed model. I made this happen, and I've made it happen for every single one of my clients. So I'm telling you this from first-hand experience. I don't tell you this just to show off. I say this to prove to you my credentials in this field and that I've made something happen that no one else has made happen. Your symmetry is a bone structure issue, however, it can be fixed. And the basis of this fix comes down to swallowing and adding force when you swallow. This is called hard swallowing. And then ensuring that you are not utilizing the lip muscles or the cheek muscles. Secondly, you need to make sure that outside of just when you swallow food, you are pressurizing your tongue upwards. Remember the palatopharyngeal arch, the really long name arch that I talked about earlier. The arch that sits here, you need to be pressurizing that throughout the day, very subtly, so force is going to travel up. Remember how I gave you this analogy, this visualization. When the arch is going to be asymmetrical, when you just pressurize, what's going to happen to the force? Well, since the arch is imbalanced, more force is traveling here, isn't it? If we think about this in physics terms, as I told you, I did study physics, it's one of my passions and it applies hugely in what I do. If we think about a force flux, just for your visualization is going to be, imagine each force is a line. Imagine there's a line of force traveling up the arch. Now, more lines are going to travel here because it's closer, isn't it? When it's further away, because of the inverse square law, what's going to happen as we go away? Well, the distance is going to reduce. It's an inverse relationship because each line is going to diverge the further away we get. If I were to give you these two AirPods, it came from the same place, but it's diverging. Same thing, the force flux of your tongue pressurizing upwards. Now, since this is closer, the location of the asymmetric sphenoid wing is closer, this is going to remodel and rotate. A torque is going to be applied, isn't it? This torque allows it to rotate into place, and the same thing is what occurs over time with the sphenoid. This is called cortical bone thickening, and that is only induced when the back of the tongue is pressurizing up the sphenoid bone. Now, I'm teaching you this because this is my passion. I'm going to tell you a bit about how you can accelerate it by giving you another story of my life. I've been passionate about physics and biology since I was young because my entire family have education in one of these two fields. So since I was a child, I've been interested. But it combined with this knowledge of appearance when I actually lived life, when I saw how different people treated me compared to my friends, because of the way that I looked. And only once I took action, when I took matters in my own hands and made this happen naturally, without the use of anything dangerous, did I see how different people treated me after compared to before. And I've taken it as my responsibility to allow people in similar positions to myself, people who are all hugely ambitious, people who have a high level of ambition in life, people who are successful in their own life endeavors, to then experience it biologically, to then experience the capacity of life quality that they are capable of through their appearance. Therefore, I've made an advanced YouTube channel. And in this advanced YouTube channel, I discuss how you can improve your appearance the same way that my one-to-one clients did, in hugely deeper depth. So you can actually begin to action changes and take action. The link to my advanced YouTube channel is the top link in the description of this video, which is right below here. I'll see you there.